Hi everyone, this is the labor market tutorial. Before going through this video, you should have watched the labor market lecture, which is also posted online. Now, this is a slight extension of demand and supply. Many of the concepts are quite straightforward. Let's go through the questions together. Now, the first question says, explain with the aid of diagrams. So in this topic, we use demand and supply. The likely effect on the equilibrium wage rate and labor employment in the following situation. So we have three situations here. The first one is imposition of a minimum age and education requirements for new foreign domestic workers in Singapore. Now this means that when we make this kind of new rule that foreign domestic workers must meet certain extra criteria, less of them are able to qualify to work in Singapore. Okay, so the supply of workers will fall, right? Because the pool of people that can meet extra requirements will be lesser. Okay, so supply of the foreign workers will fall. So as a result, wages will go up because there's now less of them. All right, and the quantity of them will fall. Okay, so a fall in the supply of foreign domestic workers, so supply curve shift left, leading to a rise in wages and a fall in employment. Okay, the next scenario we have is a fall in the price of machines, and these machines are used in assembling electronic goods for the case of labor market for production workers. Now, in this scenario, it's quite obvious that the machines are used to replace the workers. Okay, so in this question, they are considered to be substitutes. So when machines becomes cheaper and their role is to replace the production workers, so producers would tend to use more machines since they're now cheaper. Okay, so you don't need so many workers, right? Because you decide to use more machines as machines are becoming cheaper. So demand for workers will fall. So when demand for workers fall, wages will drop and then employment will fall. Okay, now just take note, whenever there's machines, stories involving machines, it may not replace the workers all the time. Sometimes machines need workers. For example, an airline buying new planes, the planes needs pilots to fly. Okay, so in this case, in this question, the machines replace the workers, but it's not always like that. So just be aware. Okay, we mentioned in the lecture that demand for workers come from firms. So when firms use more machines, all right, they don't need so many workers, demand for workers will drop. Okay? Okay, see, new technology in the aerospace industry results in increased labor productivity. Now, whenever labor become more productive, they are more attractive to hire. That means firms like workers who have high productivity. Okay, so when the productivity of workers increase, so firms will want more of them. So demand for workers will rise. Okay, so higher demand for these workers, okay, who are now more productive in the aerospace industry. So demand for the workers will shift to the right. Again, reminder: demand for workers comes from the firms. All right, because the workers are attractive to hire, they demand for more workers, so wages goes up and employment goes up. Okay. This question is on minimum wage. Now, minimum wage, we have done it before in demand and supply as a price floor. Okay, this is an application of that. Okay, if you remember your price floor. Now, in this case, it's the government that is trying to guarantee a higher wage for the workers. So it's trying to help the workers. So this is the original equilibrium wage. So the government is saying that's too low. So the minimum wage is above it. So no company can give their workers a wage that's lesser than that. Okay, it's illegal. So the minimum wage is above equilibrium. But take a look at what happens when you impose a price floor or minimum wage. The outcome is the same as a price floor. All right. Now, when the wage rate is higher, okay, when the wage rate is higher, you see that more people are willing to work. Remember, the supply of labor is by workers. Okay, workers are supplying labor to the market. So the quantity that of hours or work hours that workers are willing to work is now higher, right? Okay, previously at the equilibrium it was here. Now the workers want to work a higher quantity or more working hours, all right? Because the pay is good, so they want to work more. But the problem is because the pay is now higher, companies are not willing to hire because it's more expensive for them. So companies are only willing to hire a lower amount of labor. Okay. Now, therefore, when companies hire less and more workers want to work, so this creates a surplus. Okay, a surplus of labor. All right. So by imposing the minimum wage, it helps existing workers. So those who manage to hold on to their jobs, the quantity of workers from 0 to L1, those who manage to hold on to their job will get to enjoy the higher wage. But the problem is some workers have to be laid off because the company can no longer hire as much workers at the higher wage now. Okay, so this is the how minimum wage or a price floor function. Okay. Okay, question 3 talks about income inequality. All right, we talked about this in the lecture already. So this question is on that. Now, when we talk about demand and supply of different groups of workers, the high skilled workers and the low skilled workers, there are some assumptions as mentioned. We always assume that for high skilled workers, demand for them is high, but supply of them is low. All right, because you need time for the high skilled workers to be trained or to gain that kind of experience to be high skilled. All right, so there's not a lot of them, so supply is low. But because they are highly skilled, they are in high demand. All right, low skilled workers, the demand is low, but supply of them is high. Okay, so there's some assumptions here. Okay, now the high skilled workers, the demand is high, but supply is low, so it will have a higher wage rate. Okay, they will have a higher wage rate compared to the low skilled workers. Okay, so compared to low skilled workers, so low skilled workers demand is lower. Okay, because they're low skilled, they're not so productive, so the demand for them is lower. All right, but there's more of them around, so the supply is on the right side, so the equilibrium point is here where the mouse is pointing, so the wages is lower. Okay, now the aim of this diagram, as mentioned in the lecture, we just want to show wage differential, not so much difference in employment. Okay, now in this case, you see that the equilibrium point of the high skilled workers on the right side. So it seems as if there's more of them in the market. Alright, but it's just the way that we draw the diagram. If we draw the supply of low skilled workers higher, okay, then the equilibrium point will probably on the for the low skilled workers be on the right side. So the quantity doesn't really matter. What we want to show from this diagram is the wage differential. Why some people earn a high wage, why some people earn low wages. And the criteria is your skills level. All right, high skilled workers earn higher pay, low skilled workers earn lower pay. Okay, because of the assumption that demand for high skilled workers is high but supply of them is low, and vice versa for the low skilled workers. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at the MCQ questions. The first one says the demand for labor is a derived demand. Now we mentioned about this in the lecture. What's a derived demand? Now that means that the firm is not demanding workers for workers' sake. Alright, it's demanding workers because there's a demand for the firm's products. That's why it needs to hire people. Okay, so it's a derived demand. Okay, otherwise firms can't be demanding for workers and then not producing anything or producing things that cannot sell. All right. So a derived demand means a secondary demand. All right. The primary demand comes from the market demands for the firm's goods. That's why they need the workers to produce those goods. So it's a derived demand. Okay. So the answer is C. The demand for labor is a derived demand because it depends on the demand for the final output. All right. Okay, the next two questions. Question 2. When labor and capital are used as complementary inputs, complementary means used together, a rise in the price of capital, what will happen? Now, when capital becomes more expensive, companies will of course not use so much capital, okay, because it's more expensive. Now, because labor is complementary to capital, when firms don't use so much capital because it's expensive, they will not use as much labor also. So the answer is a fall in the demand for labor. Okay? Now, for question 3, in a free labor market, a wage rate above the equilibrium will result in what? Now, this is a typical demand supply question, right? So it's a very technical question, how you get to equilibrium. When you're not at equilibrium, how do you get there? Okay? This kind of question is quite similar to the demand and supply questions that we had, all right, a few weeks ago. So when your wage rate is above the equilibrium, that means your wage rate is too high, okay? So you have excess labor, all right? Because the wage rate is too high above the equilibrium, you have surplus, right? So a surplus of labor, and how do we correct that? A downward pressure on the wage rate. So when people want to work, they want to work, and there's a surplus of labor. So the people knows this, and they will gradually be prepared to accept a lower pay. All right. So wage rate will fall and move towards equilibrium. Okay. Okay. Question 4. An investment by a U.S. company in Singapore will lead to. Now, when companies come in to invest, of course they need workers. They are starting production, right? So they need workers. All right. So a rightward shift in the demand curve for what kind of workers? Now, because this is an aerospace giant, okay, so they need engineers. So a rightward shift in the demand for engineers, okay, and when there is a higher need for these people, of course their pay goes up, right? So a rise in the equilibrium wage rate. So higher demand curve shift to the right, okay, resulting in a higher equilibrium wage rate. Now, question 5. The supply of surgeons compared to general practitioners, your GP, okay, is what? Now, supply of surgeons, those who do operations, of course, is lower, all right, because it takes years of specialized training. Okay, you just can't become a surgeon very quickly. All right, compared to general practitioner, all right, most doctors can be a GP, all right, but they may not be able to be a surgeon, because surgeons you need years of training and years of experience. All right, so the supply of surgeons will of course be lower. Okay, 6. Accountant is likely to earn a higher pay than a usual admin assistant. Now, we are talking about income inequality again. All right. So the accountant has been more extensively trained, okay, highly skilled, all right, more highly skilled compared to the admin assistant. Now, we recall what we mentioned earlier. The higher skilled person will earn higher pay. All right. So in this case, the accountant is a higher skilled person compared to the admin assistant. So the accountant earns a higher wage rate. All right, because more resources were used to acquire the human capital that made the accountant more productive. All right. Okay, this is the end of the very simple topic and a very simple tutorial. This is like an extension of demand and supply. So there's nothing new here. All right, just that demand and supply is adapted to suit the contents of labor market. All right, so look through again if you're not sure, and ask your tutors question when we resume again next week. Okay, see you next week.